This is a story that came out in the Atlanta Black Star, September 16th, 2018. China threatens sovereignty of several African nations as it takes over their resources to cover debt. Ladies and gentlemen, we already seen they have taken over Zambia, and they are poised to take over other nations. And see, this is how China has mastermind taking over African countries, is by offering them loans that they know damn well from the jump they would not be able to pay back. And this is exactly what's happening. If they default on the loans, China gets to go in and take over all of the resources in that country. That don't seem like a good deal to me. That seems very one-sided, all in the favor of China. You know, I understand Africa has gone for so long without many things, and you desire to bring Africa up into this century. But with these outside foreigners, no, that's not the way to go. You know, as I have stated before, Africa got many educated people, and they should be able to do many things themselves. But it goes back to the corruption in leadership that really are selling out their people. And this has occurred also in Jamaica. You see, Jamaica has been taken completely over by the Chinese. And Africa would be their biggest cash cow, because that continent has endless resources there that these Chinese people are trying desperately to get their hands on all of it. You know, greed is going to make them want to take over all of the African continent and run it for themselves. Because, see, they have ran China in the ground. It's badly polluted. They can't grow anything there. That's why they're growing all of their food in Africa now. And the water is badly polluted. It's very corrupt there. So, yeah, so now they've destroyed their land, and now they want to come and take over the African continent. You know, ladies and gentlemen, they're all after the African continent. You had the Europeans in there colonizing it for a long time, and we don't need to see a repeat of that through the Chinese. My thing is, how about both of y'all get your asses out of there? The Europeans go home and the Chinese go home. If you want anything from that continent, you buy it fair and square. If you're not willing to do that, then no, you should not be allowed to stay there and rape those resources and take as much as you like and not pay for it. And see, now China is going to be able to take over all the resources and rape the hell out of the land. And you could best believe they're going to do it. They're just as greedy as the Europeans. All of y'all need to get out of Africa. All of y'all. You've been nothing but a complete pain in the ass to that continent and the people there. You all need to go home. Just get out. You cause more harm than good. Okay, let's get into this article that came out September 16th, 2018. I'll leave the link to this article in the description box. So we know there's no secret that China has gone in and made all of these loans and deals with Africa. And they knew from day one these countries would not be able to pay the money back. And this is the sneaky way that China has masterminded a way to take over the continent through loans and them defaulting on loans. And now they get to go in there and treat the people like crap and take the resources, and now they'll be able to sit there with their businesses, Chinese only, no blacks, and do all that stuff and pull it off. So this time around, Africa, you're going to have to rise up and take your nation away from the European and the Chinese. They all must leave and go home. Okay, it is no longer an option for them to stay and be there. You got the best and wealthiest continent on the face of the earth. Europe don't have a damn thing as far as resources are concerned, and neither does America. And China, if China had so many resources, they wouldn't be in Africa. Okay, let that be your indicator that China don't have shit either. If these places had so many big major resources, they wouldn't have their head in the ground stealing everything out of Africa. They're the ones with the shithole nations. They have nothing. Okay, at the forum on China-African cooperation in Beijing, I don't know why they're having something in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping uh, recently pledged an additional 60 billion in financing for projects in Africa, including 15 billion in grants and loans, 20 billion in credit, and 10 billion in development financing, and 5 billion to buy African imports. How about no loans? How about no loans? Africa can get plenty of their wealth selling the resources. Technically, if they played their right, loans from anyone. Again, you got to get all of these foreigners out of there. Get them out. If they want the resources, they come with money in hand to pay for it. And it should be no other way. Okay, the announcement is an example of China's outreach to increase trade, investments, and political ties with the continent. However, the Chinese leader did not address the issue of the indebtedness, the notion that African nations are left far too economically beholden to Chinese banks. China's investment in Africa comes with no political strings attached. Zhang said, China does not interfere with African internal affairs and does not impose its own will on Africa. President Xi also announced 8 new initiatives involving industrial promotion, infrastructure development, and healthcare, and other matters. It's still not worth it. Everything they're giving you, Africa, your resources is worth far more than anything they're offering you. And they know this. They know this. They know this. All right. I am going to go down a bit. Africa Confidential Report. As ZESCO, the Zambian state electricity company, was in talks with a Chinese company concerning a takeover of the utilities, raising concerns about national sovereignty and Chinese ownership of key components of the country's infrastructure. This came amid reports that China would take over Zambia's Kenneth Kaunda International Airport to settle the African country's debt defaults. The ZNBC, the state-owned TV and radio broadcaster, China owns 60% of Top Star Communication Limited, a joint venture created by the Zambian government to digitize its broadcast infrastructure, while ZNBC owns 40%. Now, why do China own 60%? You know, what kind of deals are your politicians doing over there in Africa? Boy, they are not looking out for the people at all. Not at all, y'all. This is just ridiculous. Okay, so, I want to go down a bit. Okay, because China is doing a lot of investing also in Ethiopia. And this article is saying that Ethiopia is one of those places that is at risk of a Chinese takeover. So let me just go down here. Um, Addis Ababa. All right, so they have a railway that cost them $4 billion and nearly a quarter of Ethiopia's 2016 government budget, faced with mounting debt. Many African nations will be unable to rely on their budgets to make their payments to the Chinese and will have to resort to in kind payments to Beijing. The International Monetary Fund reported earlier this year that sub-Saharan African Africa is experiencing a debt crisis, with 40% of nations in the region at a high risk of debt distress, and the number of countries unable to service their debt doubling to 8 in the past year, according to a report from the Center for Global Development. Uh, Djibouti, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Kenya are the African nations among 23 nations with a risk of debt distress from Chinese financing. Djibouti is among 8 countries with the highest risk of distress in the event of additional debt financing. So all of these nations are in debt to China and are at risk of being taken over by the Chinese. Wow. Africa, you got yourself in a big mess here. Djibouti, which hosts a U.S. military base, may become the latest African nation to fall to China's debt. Okay. Yeah, they call it a debt trap. I would call it that too. With public debt projected at 88% of the country's 1.72 billion GDP, with China claiming most of it, Djibouti may find itself handing over its assets to its Chinese creditors. Okay. Wow. I mean, this is just heartbreaking. You know, we are not in Africa. So, primarily, I hope there was some kind of way we could help Africa. I really do. The only way we would be able to do this, and I'm just talking about us in America, we would have to go out there and flood the Asian people where we go in and outnumber them. Then you have a chance of pushing them out. The African people are y'all gonna have to rise up. You're gonna have to rise up. There is no way you should be going through another colonization. But that is exactly what's going on right now. And it's a damn shame. Ethiopia has always been independent, pretty much. They were never colonized, but if they default on their loan, as it's stating in this article that they're on the verge of doing that, then it's going to be a complete Chinese takeover there as well. Okay, let me just go down here. The African Union may take cues from the European Union, which is pushing back against reportedly unfair trade practices by China, including acquisitions of Europe's most strategic high-tech businesses and infrastructure with new regulations against investments that is based on China's political goal rather than the market forces. The EU has become a key destination for Chinese investors, as Politico reports, with China spending 75 billion, well, 87 billion in European acquisitions and investments in 2016, including energy companies, high-tech businesses, ports, and banks. UK officials have confirmed proposals to regulate foreign acquisitions of British assets, with an eye primarily towards China and, to a lesser extent, countries such as Russia, reflecting moves by Western nations to fortify their foreign investment and takeover criteria as a matter of a national security. Further, some Asian nations are having second thoughts about their indebtedness to China. Malaysia uh, recently canceled more than 20 billion in Chinese funded projects on the grounds that they would create unsustainable debt and were unnecessary. Meanwhile, Pakistan is reconsidering projects of multi-billion-dollar Chinese Pakistan economic corridor, a fundamental part of the Belt Road Initiative. African countries should take note. And I agree with that. When China comes with their offers for loans, don't take it. Don't take it. You're going to have to make do without it, especially African nations that have not made deals with China as of yet. Don't do it. You see what's happening to Zambia. That should be a lesson to all African nations not to do business with China. I know China is offering things that the African people want, but you know what? Your resources are worth more than anything China is offering. But this is really sad that so many of these nations may fall into the hands of China, and China pretty much sabotaging them with loans that they knew from the start they had no way of paying them. The first thing y'all need to do is get rid of all of those people that are selling you out over in Africa, out of political office. And then you need to stand firm on pushing these Chinese people out of the country. There is no place for them in the country. There's no place for the Europeans and the Americans for being there either. If they want anything, let them buy it, period. It should be done no other way. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family.